Mr. President.
Senator from Hawaii.
Mr. President, this resolution being offered by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is a partisan political stunt to distract the American people from the crisis created by Donald Trump's zero-tolerance policy. Almost 3,000 children were ripped from the arms of their parents and traumatized by the president's cruelty. Yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee had a closed-door briefing with officials from the Department of Justice, Department of Health and Human Services, and Department of Homeland Security. The American people deserve to hear from these officials in public and under oath. All these officials provided at this briefing, not under oath, was more obstruction and obfuscation. The witness from Immigration and Customs Enforcement even claimed that they, quote, did not mess up here. Separating almost 3,000 children from their parents, not meeting judicially set deadlines for reunifying these children. The trauma continues. Is there anybody in America paying attention to this issue who actually believes there was no mess up? We need a public hearing to hear from these officials under oath. Donald Trump is weaponizing fear to pursue his anti-immigration agenda, and we are not going to be party to that. We should be focused like laser beams on reuniting the children with their parents.
Yield.
I yield to the senator from Illinois.
I'd like to thank the senator from Hawaii for joining in this statement about the agency of ICE, which is in the Department of Homeland Security. There are certain things that I think even Democrats and Republicans coming together could agree on. Let me tell you what I think they are. Border security. The United States needs security at its borders. There's no question about that, whoever the president may be. The second thing that we agree on is that no one who's dangerous should be allowed to come into this country. And anyone who's in here undocumented and dangerous should leave, should be removed. We all agree on that, do we not? The third thing, which we found 68 senators agreed on, was comprehensive immigration reform. Our immigration laws are a mess, an absolute mess, and that's why we continue to debate the topic. 68 of us came to the floor here and voted for a bipartisan measure 5 years ago to fix the whole system. It passed the Senate, died in the House. Now where are we today? We're here today debating on the floor the future of ICE. There are parts of the function and responsibility of this agency of ICE which all of us would agree on. The fact that ICE has important responsibilities, combating serious criminal activity like smuggling, bulk cash, drugs, weapons, human trafficking, enforcing immigration laws against terrorists, violent criminals, and others who would do us harm. There's no argument about that. But what has become controversial is the Trump administration's new immigration policy. You see, we don't have the resources to deport 11 million undocumented people, nor do we have the resources to arrest everyone who presents themselves at the border. What this administration has done, though, is to say they are going to criminalize, charge as criminals, everyone who shows up at the border. By doing that, they take limited resources and focus them on a mass of people, most of whom are no threat at all to the United States, instead of focusing their resources on the drug smugglers, the traffickers, the would-be terrorists. Those are our priorities, are they not? For the safety of our homes, our families, and our communities. And here we have this resolution that was brought to the floor to commend ICE in all its functions. Well, I can just tell you, I don't join in that resolution. I specifically don't join in it when it comes to the president's zero-tolerance policy. It became the policy of the Trump administration and the United States government to forcibly remove 3,000 children from their parents. That's bad enough, is it not? The notion that you take a baby out of the arms of its mother, a toddler, an infant, separate a young child. We did it under the President Trump zero-tolerance policy. Now let me tell you what added insult to that injury. At that point, there was no effort made to make certain that we could reunite the parent with the children. Time and again, we would meet downstairs for a briefing from ICE and other agencies, and they'd tell us, we don't know where the parents are. We really don't know where the kids are. We're going to have to go looking. Imagine separating up to 3,000 children from their parents The United States government did not keep a record of what happened to those kids. Ship something by UPS. They give you a tracking number. Go online. You can track that package wherever it may be. Order that pizza from Domino's. Call them after 15 minutes and say, "Where's the pizza?" They'll tell you. Check your coat at the restaurant before you go to the table. When you come back and hand them that little piece of paper, they give you your coat. Pretty simple, is it not? But when it came to children and families, this agency, ICE, along with other agencies of this government, lost them. In one agency in Chicago, they told me that the search for the parents of the little kids they had was like a scavenger hunt. They just started calling right and left to try to figure out where the parent might be. Yesterday, we had a briefing. And finally, these agencies came up with some numbers. 2,550 children still in our custody, not reunited with their families. 1,800 parents we haven't linked up with families yet, and we're linked up with their children. And we want to put a resolution on the floor to commend this activity, to praise them for their great work, not me. They do good work in a lot of important areas, and I'll be happy to join in that chorus. But for us to stand here and ignore the obvious, that this zero-tolerance policy has given our nation a black eye, has raised questions about our values as Americans, has created situations which we cannot morally defend, separating children from their mothers. You know what the American Academy of Pediatric Medicine tells us? The doctors tell us this is an institutional form of child abuse to remove these children. I've seen them. These poor kids, 5 and 6 years old, in these settings. The place I visited in Chicago was doing its best to help the children, but 2 little girls walked into the room where I was sitting, holding hands, cute little kids, and it was my opportunity to meet about 10 or 12 of the kids who'd been separated from their parents under the zero-tolerance policy. These 2 little girls were holding hands. I thought they were sisters, and we asked in Spanish. No, amigas, she said, friends. They'd become friends to one another. It turns out one was 5 years old from Guatemala, one was 6 years old from Chiapas, Mexico. They were hanging on to one another because that's all they had, was one another, because our government separated them from their mothers. Now this agency, which is struggling to find these mothers, cannot, in some circumstances, even link up the children with their parents. No, I'm not going to join in a resolution of congratulations for the work that they've done. Many of the things they've done have been courageous and important for the security of this country. But when it comes to the zero-tolerance policy, it is not. I do want to make one last point. Listen to what the top agents at ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Agency, which focuses on serious transnational criminal activity, had to say. Last month, a majority of the agents focusing on transnational criminal activity wrote a letter to the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, asking that Homeland Security investigations be removed from ICE because of, quote, the political nature of civil immigration enforcement, close quote. These are men and women who are focusing on serious crime, and they asked to be removed from ICE. They're tired of the politics. I'm weary of it as well. We need to start solving these problems. Border security, dangerous people kept out of this country and removed, comprehensive immigration reform, and for goodness sakes, reunite these children with their parents. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise in support of the brave men and women of our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. These are law enforcement officers who risk their lives every day to keep this country safe. Rising in support of law enforcement used to be a bipartisan issue. It used to be an issue that brought us together, that unified us. Sadly, as we have seen in the preceding minutes, that is no longer the case. I rise today to urge my Democratic colleagues to say no to the reckless and radical voices within their party that are pulling their party so far out of the mainstream, so far out of touch with the American people that it is barely recognizable. For a long time, when Democrats were debating immigration issues, they used to say, well, of course we support enforcing the laws, almost as an obligatory throwaway. Instead, we are here today debating abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, the exact antithesis of where most congressional Democrats claimed they were. All of this started because a few weeks ago, a longtime Democratic incumbent member of the House found himself beaten in a primary in New York State by an avowed socialist. And as a result, many of my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle are suddenly terrified of their left flank. Because her campaign focused on abolishing ICE, abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, more and more Democrats, incumbent Democrats, have said they too were open to abolishing ICE. Mr. President, I call on this body to pull back from the abyss. On immigration, there are areas of good faith disagreement that this body has debated, will continue to debate. I've long characterized my views on immigration as being able to be summed up in 4 words: legal good, illegal bad. I think the vast majority of Texans, the vast majority of Americans agree with that. There are a host of immigration. I would urge this body to pass this common sense resolution, standing with law enforcement, standing for enforcing our borders and stopping violent criminal murderers, kidnappers, rapists that ICE arrests every year. Abolishing law enforcement puts all of us at peril. And so I call upon my Democratic colleagues to reject that radical and reckless position. I yield the floor.